Hi, everyone. This is Paul Matthew. I'm a staff scientist at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and I'll be moderating the session. We'll just give it maybe one more minute, see if there are any last minute stragglers, and then we'll get right started. So just hang in there. All right, I think we're about 40 attendees. I'd call that a good quorum, so I think we can get started. Again, my name is Paul Matthew, and I'm very glad to be a moderator for this webinar. And again, thanks to the Local Government Sustainable Energy Coalition, or LGSEC, for hosting this webinar. And we are featuring a member city of the LGSEC, that is Chula Vista. The LGSEC is a coalition of over 30 members representing local government needs to the CPUC on various clean energy issues. And you can learn more about them at lgsec.org. So just a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll dive right in. Please keep yourself muted so that we can hear our speakers clearly, of course. That's stating the obvious. I think everyone should be on board with that after more than a year of pandemic Zoom. Please use the Q&A function to send questions throughout the webinar. Again, please don't use the chat. We're using the Q&A function. So make sure you click on that button to submit your questions. Next slide, please. Yes, and I just mentioned again, I just want to make another plug for the LGSEC, over 30 members. And we're glad to feature Chula Vista today. So our very first speaker, we're going to have three speakers, Barbara Lochi, Cory Downs, and Eric Engelman. So I'll briefly introduce each of them right before their talks, and then we'll wrap up with, we'll certainly have enough time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. Barbara Lochi is a conservation specialist with the City of Chula Vista. She is a green building professional, has worked on sustainability programs for 12 years in various roles. She's worked for Chula Vista for about 7 years on energy efficiency and sustainability programs for commercial buildings and businesses. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to you, Barbara. I will tell everyone, we're going to launching a poll right before each speaker. So you've probably seen a poll pop up. Please do answer that, and somewhere during the presentation, we'll present the results. So Barbara, over to you.
Hello, thank you for having me. So my name is Barbara, and I work for the City of Chula Vista. Next slide, please. Oh, I see the poll results. Thank you for the answers. So the City of Chula Vista has had a climate action plan ongoing since 2002, actually. The plan has been updated multiple times. The last time it was updated in 2017. It was first approved by the Sustainability Commission and then City Council. And staff was directed to develop ordinances geared toward energy efficiency and conservation. And one of the targets set by the Climate Action Plan is to retrofit 20% of multifamily and commercial spaces to achieve 50% savings by 2035. So it is a little bit of an ambitious goal. So we went straight to work. Next slide, please. So our ordinance was approved in 2021. It's an energy benchmarking ordinance. And one of the reasons why we adopted this ordinance and the requirements of it is to basically incite building owners to be kind of competitive also in the marketplace, so that they have to disclose their energy performance publicly. And also they have to disclose it to their tenants. This kind of helps with their energy savings, and as well with kind of like improvement of their own buildings. Next slide, please. So how to benchmark? I'm sorry. Okay. So how to benchmark? You, as a building owner or a building owner representative, you're going to have to register on Energy Star Portfolio Manager's EPA website, importing your energy bills. In our area, San Diego Gas and Electric provides the energy data. But of course, in the rest of the state, you have to deal with your own utility, or if you have a CCA. Portfolio Manager calculates the Energy Star score between 1 and 100. And our ordinance requirement is that the score should be over 80 points, the 80th percentile. If that is not the case, then we have requirements for buildings to improve and kind of like raise that number. Our reporting link is provided by HAS. So if a building owner owns buildings in Chula Vista, is going to have to get in touch with us. Our email address is benchmark@chulavistaca.gov. And we provide that link. And so the building owner is going to be able to, just by following that link, kind of report all their data to us. Next slide, please. So, and our ordinance is basically geared towards improving the performance of the buildings in the city. And so additional requirements come if the building is not performing the way we expect it to perform. Audits will prioritize the energy efficiency investments with the best return on investment. So we require audits every 5 years if the building is not performing well. And by doing that, we also understand that, you know, there are economic impacts. So any investment that the building owner makes towards improving the energy consumption of that building has to make sense, and so have, you know, a good return on investment. The retro commissioning, of course, provides low cost and immediate results, and then the performance standards assure follow up on audits as well. Next slide, please. So the updated climate action plan that we are implementing requires building performance to be at par with other cities. But what we also are doing is requiring more than other cities have required. And the way we did this was by studying all the other cities that have building performance ordinances and require energy benchmarking. And we have improved upon those ordinances. And so even the folks at the California Energy Commission, they have kind of praised us because they think that our ordinance is kind of innovative and a little bit up there with the requirements. Next slide, please. So this is a comparison of our ordinance, which is at the bottom, compared to other ordinances all over the country. And of course, other cities have adopted ordinances throughout, 2020 and 2021. So, there may be other cities that have adopted ordinances similar to ours, but as you can see from this table, we meet every single requirement that other cities have required as well. So the performance standard is something that we pride ourselves for, because some cities are not requiring a performance standard. Next slide, please. So we require this annual disclosure for all buildings 20,000 square feet and above. So the state of California requires for buildings 50,000 square feet and above to benchmark and report, but we lowered the threshold also because of the buildings in our city. You know, every city is different, and so we have older buildings that are smaller, and we wanted to cover as many as possible. And then buildings that have improved 10 or 30% after 5 years and score less than 80 are still required to have an audit after the 5 years, and then improve after the 10th year. So they really have time to improve upon their energy consumption, but you know, we do require that. We definitely ask of them to pay attention and to make sure that they can make decisions to improve their consumption over those years. And the audit, the ASHRAE audit, is always a great tool to do that, to kind of pinpoint issues that the building may have. Next slide, please. So buildings, multifamily as well, are required to benchmark and disclose. And so the requirements are a little different because of course there are tenant spaces and then there are the common areas. And so these are the requirements for those buildings that will not meet, you know, the performance requirements. Next slide, please. And then fees and fines. This is a comparison of our ordinance versus ordinances in other cities in California. I have to say that one of the main fees that we are going to implement right away is going to be, if they don't benchmark, there will be a fine. As far as all the other fees and fines, for example, for not meeting performance requirements, those will be decided at a later time, also because we are taking in consideration that 2020 pandemic and you know, the economic impact of it. So we do understand our ordinance is in a way, we want to be friendly and we want to help building owners improve their energy consumption. We don't want to punish them for not performing right away. So next slide, please. So these are our requirements. Starting in 2022, so next year, we are asking that all buildings 20,000 square feet and above that are commercial or multifamily report to us, and then we will report on their behalf to the state. And then still in 2022, after they report, they also have to disclose to their tenants, and their energy data will be disclosed publicly. And then we require an audit, as I mentioned earlier, for those buildings that will not be performing. And they will be required after 5 years to have an audit and provide us with the results. And then 5 years after that, they're going to be required to show that they did take steps to apply whatever was found in that audit. One little parenthesis here, I did not make a slide for this. Although we are starting next year with the benchmarking requirement, we are running a pilot right now. So if among you, there are some building owners that own buildings in Chula Vista, please get in touch with us, because we are looking for volunteers to report their data to us so that we can test our system. We can, learn as we are doing this, how to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and then report to the state as well. Next slide, please. Do you have any questions?
Thanks very much, Barbara. We'll be taking questions right at the end. So if folks do have questions, again, please submit them in the Q&A. I see there's already one over there, in fact. So we definitely encourage that, and we'll get to those. Thanks very much, Barbara.
Thank you.
All right, with that, let's move on to our next presenter, who is Cory Downs. And we're also going to launch a poll. So please take a look at that poll and answer those. We'll display the results as soon as we get a critical mass of responses. Cory is a sustainability specialist with the City of Chula Vista and manages their residential energy and water efficiency outreach and climate action planning. His responsibilities include compiling the GHG inventories, the CAP updates, and climate equity efforts. Before working with the city full-time, he was an environmental scientist with AECOM and a climate fellow with ICLEI. So Cory, over to you.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having us. And first I'll say, apologize for the name, a different name for me and Barbara. We have the same position, but sometimes goes by slightly different titles. Feel free. So I'll be talking about Chula Vista's residential energy efficiency building ordinance. Next slide. And just seeing some of those, and I would say both the lack of implementation, supporting staff, and concern over building owners' ability are two really good concerns. So that's good to hear. Thanks for that. So this is just what I'll be talking about. I always like to start with a little bit of background for our city. Note that before we went to required actions, there was some voluntary actions. Focus on the ordinance and then our next steps. Next slide. So Chula Vista started, we're a growing community. Here is a little screenshot from the cost effectiveness explorer on our existing building single family units. As you can see, there's, a good section post 2005. And we've adopted previous reach code cycles when, things like 10 to 15% above code were a lot more achievable and kind of in the realm of what others were doing. We adopted some of those, but that still doesn't get us to the older buildings that are in our building stock. So that really led us to look at requiring energy efficiency in an existing home. And this also came from a stakeholder group called our Climate Change Working Group. And as a part of that stakeholder, we did have some realtors in it, and they made sure that when we looked at requiring retrofits for existing homes, they said, okay, but not at point of sale. So in our climate action plan, it actually says, like, parentheses, not at point of sale. And to be fair, I think that was very good advice and stakeholder input they provided, because I can say that without that, this ordinance probably would never, or if we went that route, it wouldn't have been adopted, because they have, they're very concerned about that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we did start, before we've done voluntary actions, we've done home checkups where we go into residents' homes. We really like talking about how to make homes more energy efficient. We go out to community events. We've had, kind of some big banners that are up talking about energy efficiency. We have a home toolkit that's in our library that you can see there. So residents can check out different tools, or even do take some measures and take them home, like the LED bulb there. And we also have a climate action challenge, which is a kind of a website that tracks homes' carbon footprint and then various actions that they can take with community members. So, we've definitely been talking a lot about retrofitting your home, but I think all of this, it doesn't necessarily replace the place of mandatory action, like the ordinance that we adopted. Next slide. And the ordinance that we adopted, it's focused on homes built before 2006 that are performing additions or major remodels to also perform energy efficient upgrades to the existing portion of the home. And so this is kind of focusing on those older homes As you'll see, we did focus on the additions or major remodels, so it has a pretty high threshold for qualifying for the project. There were other scenarios that we considered, and I think there, if you wanted to, that's one area where you can kind of use as a dial to turn up and make it more impactful or minimize the impact a little bit. But looking at that threshold is really important as well. Next slide. And additionally, one of the ways that we customized the ordinance was by making it kind of a point-based system, just looking at measures installed. And so in the next slide, I'll mention what all the measures are, but based on where your home is in our home or in our city, we have a portion of the city that's in climate zone 10. So there's a little bit more requirements there. And the age of the home depends how many energy efficiency requirements they have to include. This started as higher. So in this, it started as 91914 would have been required for 5 measures. But some of the feedback that was really concerned about, that would the package price for that 5 measures did get a little bit more expensive with air sealing, duct sealing, attic insulation, and so there was just some concern about the high impact, and so they kind of bumped it down 1. And so that was, again, some flexibility that we added, but if you wanted to be more aggressive, you definitely don't need to include that. And then one of the other pieces of the kind of the dial that you have is, again, the threshold. So, we had that high, it has to be moving a structural component, moving a window, altering something of that nature. We exempted ADUs, other medically necessary improvements, and a lot of other kind of smaller permits, or some of these you don't even need to get a permit for. Just because there wasn't a strong enough nexus between the work that we were requiring and the work that was being done. But again, if you wanted to kind of crank that dial up a little bit, that's definitely an opportunity, or crank it back down. Next slide. So these are the energy efficiency measures that that qualify under the ordinance. As you can see, it's pretty basic energy efficiency. A lot of homes have probably already done some of these similar measures. But we also did include non-cost effective measures, as you can see, the 3 down at the bottom. These were not found to be cost effective in the cost effectiveness studies, but they are an alternative to the package that we originally had. And since we're using that kind of numbers point-based system, it works really well to allow, if they're already doing high efficiency water heaters and they want to take credit for that, it's something that they can do. And then this is a flyer that we created to help just talk about energy efficiency, but also the ordinance as well. Next slide. As I mentioned, there was a number of exemptions. If homes have already completed measures, if they will include different measures, but still energy efficient, but just not in our ordinance. If it's a fully solar powered home, not just has solar, but if it has solar to offset the home's energy consumption, both electricity and natural gas. That was one that we did get some kind of pushback on, but I think it makes a lot of sense that to be the more encompassing solar. Low income was one that was also added as the policy developed. And then also the ability to pre-certify. So if someone's thinking of doing something later, they can kind of talk with conservation staff and get their home pre-certified, so it makes the process go smoother. As I mentioned there, development services, our development services staff was not able to review exemptions for these, and so conservation staff will be doing that. So we kind of had to play a little bit of support our development staff, which we're happy to do. But there was that concern from our development staff. This is something that's it's new. It's not necessarily what they're used to looking at, and so that's an area where other staff from conservation, sustainability were able to. Next slide. We've been promoting the ordinance. It was adopted in December. We are promoting it right now. It's not being enforced. Our development services staff, between going all digital at home, going back and just trying to they're also doing an update of their software. So there's kind of a lot of balls in the air right now, but we're promoting it, letting residents know about it and know that they can pre-certify if they're thinking of doing something later. We have a retrofit website with all the forms and information on there. And we've also sent out emails to contractors that are kind of known to our development staff and do these types of projects. Next slide. So next steps, like I said, we hope to be enforcing the ordinance in early next year. There is, and I forgot to mention it earlier when we were talking about the measures, but there is a new cost effectiveness study that's out and has some slightly different measures. So we might take this time off to see if we want to kind of update our ordinance a little bit before it is enforced as well. But if you're interested in doing something like this, I would encourage you to take a look at that, and I'll share a link to the study after I'm done talking. But we want to start enforcing it, start tracking it, support inspection staff. There definitely is some concern about the new types of items that they'll be looking for, or a lack of ability to inspect, like attic insulation. Sometimes they said that they might not even be able to inspect that if it's not kind of accessible enough. And so, those unique cases are what we'll have to look at. And then, there's lots of different kind of, like I said, there's dials that we can look at. Do we want to turn them up, turn them down a little bit? And then also, I think that it's important to point out that this ordinance, we take measures, it's an energy efficiency ordinance designed to lower, reduce utility bills, but it doesn't support or, solve the issue of equity in home retrofits. And that these are, typically high cost projects that are already going on, but how do we support more low-income residents to be doing energy efficiency improvements in their home as well. And then also with the drought going on, is there opportunity for more water saving measures? Some of the measures are low flow fixtures, but are there kind of some other, now that we have this opportunity in the home, are there some other ways that we can help preserve or present conservation? Next slide. And that's it. And the last thing I'll mention really quickly is just about some of the exemptions. We did have exemptions for technical infeasibility and project value cutoff if the project value was higher than 20% of the total project. And those are definitely ordinances that are more challenging to enforce, and that's where conservation will be coming in. But as we are going through we really wanted to have some of those pressure valves, since this is something we haven't done as much. We want to make sure that we're not requiring something that is, really incapable, or the home's not really able to do. And so we do have those kind of, for the unique situations. We want to make sure that, it's not 100% of the homes are saying it's technically infeasible. Might have to change it if that's the case, but we do have some of those, like I said, pressure valves built in. Thank you much.
Great, thanks very much, Cory. And again, we see some questions coming in, so keep them coming, and we'll get to them after our last presentation here. So with that, I'm going to move on to our last presentation. There's one last poll here as well, so go ahead and answer that as well while I introduce Eric Engelman. So Eric, over the last decade, he has served as the Senior Energy Policy Advisor for the City of San Diego and founded Energy Policy Consultants to help other local governments accelerate the adoption of building decarbonization policies. He and the EPC team are now focused on streamlining data-driven energy policymaking for all California cities and counties through software, namely the Cost Effectiveness Explorer, which is in fact the subject of his presentation. So with that, Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. All right. So there are a ton of great resources available to help cities interested in adopting REACH codes through the statewide Codes and Standards program. And the localenergycodes.com website is a great hub for all of those. And I'm really excited to tell you guys more about one of those resources in particular, the Cost Effectiveness Explorer. So I think it's safe to say everybody here would like to be able to adopt building decarbonization policies more quickly and to more readily utilize data to inform those policy decisions. And that's exactly why we developed the Cost Effectiveness Explorer. Now, before I tell you more, I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about who I am and how the Cost Effectiveness Explorer came about. And next slide. Oh, and before I do that, I'm actually just going to do a brief overview of what is a REACH code. So REACH code is a local amendment to the state's building code, specifically the energy code portion. And it is the primary legal mechanism for cities to adopt building decarbonization policies, but it's not the only one. And there's a growing suite, which is an exciting development. And in order to adopt this type of policy, this type of REACH code, there are two requirements. A city must come to a finding that the additional requirements that they're adding on to the state energy code are going to save energy, and that they are cost effective as they pay back over time. And so that's a big constraint when making this type of policy, because the cost effectiveness is a big driver of what is within the realm of possibility for a local government to adopt. And the California Energy Codes and Standards Program, which supports the localenergycodes.com website, supports the Cost Effectiveness Explorer tool, also funds a number of statewide cost effectiveness studies that local governments can use to find measures that they can potentially adopt using this legal mechanism based on whether they're cost effective in your city and your city's climate zones. Okay, next slide, please. So I've now been working in local government energy policy focused on building energy efficiency for the last decade. And as Paul mentioned, I spent the first 2 of those years in the trenches serving as energy policy advisor to San Diego Mayor Jerry Sanders. And like many of you and many local energy policymakers, I was faced with a challenge of trying to make good energy policies in a fast evolving, highly technical subject area where I had little expertise and I was spread razor thin across a number of initiatives. So finding the right information at the right time was pretty vital. And I had to learn quickly what kind of support helped save me time and make better decisions, and equally important, what kind of support just made more work for me. So after that role, I decided to start my company, Energy Policy Consulting, where I've been the last 8 years helping other cities make energy policies and focused on supporting them through providing powerful analyses in an easily digestible format so they can make better policy decisions more quickly. And so during that time, I had the honor of working closely with the City of Chula Vista on the very policies we just learned about, as well as other local governments. And I've helped many cities through the process of starting with a vague policy concept, such as a cap strategy saying, let's reduce building sector emissions by X% by X year, and then developing those into a council-ready REACH code ordinance. And I've learned where the pain points are for local governments in that process, from finding and utilizing cost-effectiveness studies to obtaining building stock data and estimating the impact of a potential policy. And I've learned how to present those data points to help local government policymakers weigh policy decisions and make trade-offs. Now, 2 years ago, I started working with the statewide codes and standards program to bring that kind of support to all California jurisdictions through software, and the Cost Effectiveness Explorer was born. So the Cost Effectiveness Explorer, advance 2 slides, please. Thank you. The Cost Effectiveness Explorer is a free web tool designed specifically for California local government staff and stakeholders. The objective, again, is to accelerate REACH code adoption and support data-driven decision-making. And we launched in fall 2020 and currently have data from 4 statewide cost effectiveness studies digitized, with more coming. And we also have residential building stock estimates for all 500 plus California cities and counties by single family or multifamily and vintage. And we have features to help users build one or more hypothetical policy scenarios, model their impacts, and collaborate with colleagues. But rather than just telling you about it, I would love to show you. Now, I wanted to make this demo, which I'll begin in a moment, as relevant as possible. So yesterday, I reached out to one of the participants here today, Danielle Myler, Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the City of Alameda. And she shared that they were in the early stages of thinking about an existing residential building policy. And she graciously agreed to participate a little bit today. So before we begin the demo, I wanted to let Danielle briefly tell you about some of the requirements and requirement types and triggers that they're considering for potential existing residential policy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Mueller. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the City of Alameda, and I'm really happy to join today and learn more about this tool. In Alameda, we have a climate action and resilience plan, as so many of you do, that calls for electrification of buildings. We just passed last month our all-electric new building ordinance, and as Eric mentioned, just evaluating our options for existing buildings. We had a report that was completed by Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, a master's student project that looked at policy options specific for Alameda. And not surprisingly, we're looking at time of sale, time of renovation, time of burnout, and a variety of financing options. We are lucky enough to have our own municipal utility that's been providing 100% clean energy since 2020 and is a great partner for us in providing incentives and potentially financing options to residents. So we're just in the early phases and really appreciate learning about what Chula Vista and other cities are doing, and looking forward to this demo.
Great, thank you so much, Danielle. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, and we're going to start at localenergycodes.com here, and which is, as I mentioned, a great hub for a lot of different resources, including all the cost-effectiveness studies, as well as I wanted to highlight. So this menu here, you can click on resources, and there's cost effectiveness studies. There in other resources, there's the Energy Code ACE, which is a great resource for finding that little piece of the energy code that's relevant to whatever you're working on at the time. A map of local ordinances across the state and other resources. And for the Cost Effectiveness Explorer, like I said, you can access us right here, the second link here. All right. So here's the beginning page of the Explorer, and you can see that the first item here is if you need a little refresher on what is the cost effectiveness study and why it matters, and what is the reach code, you can access this guide here by clicking Read Quick Guide. But we're going to jump right in and share our location. So we're going to pretend for this demo that we're all employees of the City of Alameda, and with Danielle's prompt, we are thinking about existing building policies, existing residential policies. So I'm going to enter the City of Alameda as the first step. And we land at this next page, which reminds us at the top that the City of Alameda has one climate zone, which is Climate Zone 3. And that there are 4 cost effectiveness studies that have results for Climate Zone 3 here. And we can click on each one of them to learn more about the studies, download the PDF, or we can jump straight into the results. So I'm going to do that and click See Study Results. And next we have in the main screen here, a number of tables that summarize the results that are specifically relevant to the City of Alameda from the 4 studies that we have in the tool. And you'll see across the top, there's a number of filters that help us focus in on specifically what kind of results we are interested in. And so the first one that pops up is the one we're looking for. We're interested in low-rise, we're interested in existing residential buildings, and this is the newest study version, 2021. And we can see here that there's an estimated 23,410 single-family units in the City of Alameda. And then we see in the boxes below, they start with a breakdown of vintage in terms of year built. That's about 75% of those 23,000 homes were built before 1978. And if we want to learn more about the city of Alameda's residential building stock, we can click through that pie chart and we get a nice little overview of the residential building stock in Alameda, including the breakdown by single family and multifamily, as well as the further breakdown by vintage. And we can see over here that the single family pre-1978 is the most predominant. So we can share this summary, we can download it as a PDF or a CSV, but let's jump back to the results page and explore further some measures that were found cost-effective for these pre-1978 single family homes. So I'm going to click back on results here. It'll take a second to load. And we're going to focus on this box here, and we can expand it to now see a long list of measures and the results from the this cost effectiveness study for those measures for Alameda's climate zone and this vintage and single family homes. And so you can see here we've got the on-bill benefit to cost ratio first, then the incremental cost of each measure on a per home basis, the annual bill savings, the annual gas savings, and electricity savings. Now, this is quite a long list. Not all of them are cost effective, as you see. So let's use the filter here at the top to only show those measures that were on-bill cost effective. And give it a second to load. And okay, so now we've got a shorter list of measures to work with. Okay, so back to the results area. For each measure, we not only have the per home results, but we also have forecasts of if we were to adopt a requirement that that measure be implemented, what might be the citywide impact. So this is the total compliance cost. We have the life cycle emission savings of the potential policy and the life cycle on bill savings. Now, Danielle just told us a moment ago that Alameda has a municipal utility that is already providing 100% renewable electricity. So to make the emissions forecast more accurate, let's change the assumption there to account for that fact. So I'm going to click on assumptions, and under current grid clean energy share, our tool is assuming by default that 33% of the grid supplied electricity is generated from renewable emission sources. So I'm going to amp that way up as far as it goes. Oh, that's good enough. And let it recalculate. All right, and so now we have we've got a better better estimates for the emission savings of these measures if we were to adopt them as policies. So also, given what Danielle told us about their electricity supply, we can surmise that Danielle's probably more concerned with measures that save natural gas than electricity savings. So we can sort the cost-effective measures that are shown here on the basis of how much gas they save, they're predicted to save. And so we can see that there are 4 measures that have gas savings associated with them. And of those, the first 2 are measures that are assumed to be implemented at time of burnout. And the 3rd and 4th ones are simple energy efficiency measures. So let's say as a starting point, let's just go with the 2 simple energy efficiency measures and look at what that would look like if we were to create a hypothetical policy around those. So I'm going to click both of those, and I'm going to click Save to Policy. And I'm going to give my policy a name. I'm going to say Test Basic Gas Measures. And I'm going to create my policy, and it gets saved there. And
Eric, just a quick interruption. If we have at time, so a couple of minutes, if you could wrap up.
Great. Okay. So I'll wrap up in just a moment here. So I'm just going to show where this policy is that I just created, and I'm able to open it up and see the overall impact of that policy, the impact broken down by the different measures. I'm able to change some of the policy assumptions, like if I want to simulate a time of sale policy. I know from a little web research that in the Bay Area, the average home that about 8% of homes turn over in a year. So I can reconfigure this penetration rate from 5% to 8% and get a little bit more accurate forecasts. And I can also create some other policies for some of the options that Danielle mentioned. And I've actually, just to save time, already done so. And I'm going to show you guys those here. So I created a time of renovation policy, a time of sale policy, as well as 2 different electrification on burnout policies. And this is a menu that sort of lets you compare different policy options side by side, and you can see the different assumptions that went into these impact forecasts, and you can see at a glance which ones might have the highest emission savings, the highest compliance costs, etc. And you can share this comparison with your colleagues here. So I will leave it at that for this demonstration and encourage you to explore more on your own. And get back to my slides. I think for the sake of time, I will I'll just quickly review my last slide and just let you know that we have a number of new features that are coming online, including new studies, support for new building ordinances, new construction forecasts, and even some features that will help you take a policy you've developed in the Cost Effectiveness Explorer and draft an ordinance and work through how you might offer flexible compliance paths. All right, so I will wrap that up, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Eric. Again, a lot of capability. It's always fun to look at real tools, live especially, and it met the good rule of no demos crashing. So that's great. So with that, I'll just take a couple of minutes to just share some things that are happening at the federal level with the Department of Energy. There's a lot of technical support for building performance standards. There's huge interest in this in the federal sector now, especially with the new administration. So if we could go to the next slide. I think needless to say, everyone here knows building performance standards are expanding. I mean, it's just 3 cities in one state right now, but it's expanding a lot. And as many cities are considering it, grappling with various policy questions, such as what metrics to use and how should electrification be addressed and what are the impacts of timing and should certain buildings be exempt and so on. So if you could go to the next slide. So I think all I'm here to say is that there is technical support from the Department of Energy to help inform policymaking. We've been supporting several cities, DC, Seattle, Aspen, and Berkeley, with some of these policy type of questions. And so if there are any cities here that are interested in engaging with national efforts on this front, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to engage on that. So let's jump, I think, straight to Q&A now. And if I could ask all our speakers to turn on their cameras, that would be great. And let's see, let's go to Q&As. I think some have been answered directly. So I'm just going to start with the open ones. And I'm going to turn it over to each speaker as they see appropriate. So let's just start at the top. We're just going to go down this. So Eric, is there more in-depth training on how to use the software?
Not yet. We hope to create one, but Jordan, or for any other participants on the call, I'd be happy to walk you through, so feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. There's a question from Sunil on what efficiency steps have been taken so far, and what do you think about the smart home? I think that might be for Cory and Barbara.
So I mean, our ordinance is a core energy efficiency ordinance. To get to one of the other questions that was answered, it doesn't require fuel shifting or electrification. Everything in there is justified on its cost effectiveness and energy efficiency. So far, I think, and I think that this ordinance is a good starting place, but I think it should go further and include some of those. I think there's lots of opportunities for smart home. One of the things that we'll also be looking at is how do we turn water heaters into batteries and get connected water heaters, and how do we support that? So I think there's still a lot to go. One other thing I'll quickly mention, the next one about the development process, and this was one I was. It's harder to type into a box there, because it's we had a climate change working group, which was a group of volunteers that met about 11 times monthly, had realtors included in that group. And so, that was really valuable feedback that we got, and stakeholder engagement. But then more specifically for this ordinance, we definitely worked very closely with the realtors, because those are they represent a lot of homeowners, and they're also very active locally. So and I can't help but chuckle a little bit, because when we first presented this ordinance, the realtors came up to city council, and after seeing all of this, which is about a retrofit ordinance, their first comment was, do not pass a point of sale ordinance. So I think it shows that sometimes, we listened, I think, very clearly, but they still want to make that message. And so, I'm sure they're active in other communities as well. We even did a draft presentation before the ordinance was finalized to our local realtors group. So we tried to kind of stay as much as possible in touch with them. But also understand that their members are, they have their own things they want to say. So even though we said all of that, they still wanted to talk against point of sale.
Barbara, anything you'd like to add to that?
We had a little bit of pushback from realtors for the benchmarking ordinance, but we explained to them, and one of the things that really helped was the scattering of the audit after the first 5 years, and then the requirements, after 10 years, because let's be honest, after all, by 2030, even commercial buildings are going to be required to have, only solar. All of them have to have solar for new construction. And by then, with tenants coming and going, these buildings will go for tenant improvements over the years. And so, they will be required to do that work anyway by the state. So that really helped, rationalize it.
Thank you. The next question, Eric's for you, is around the tool and how the sources for the stock data and how you were able to get the stock data. So if you could speak to that, and then I think there was a related question actually further down about what the sources are for the residential building stock data.
So we had to utilize a variety of sources. There was nothing off the shelf that fit our needs of not only providing building stock data by vintage for each city and the unincorporated areas of counties in California, but also by climate zones within each city, because about 150 of the 500 plus cities have more than one climate zone bisecting their jurisdiction. So we used, the short answer is we used some historical census data, some data from the California Department of Finance, and we had to do some estimation and interpolation using some satellite imagery to convert from census tract to the unit of geography that we were using, which was climate zone jurisdiction pairs.
And actually, I'm going to butt in with one additional question, Eric, on the cost data. Are those how geographically resolved are they? Are they sort of California wide, or are they actually adjusted for local cost conditions? And also, how frequent cost data are, they get out of date almost as soon as they're published. So how do you deal with updating that?
Yeah, so we're echoing the results of the underlying 4 cost effectiveness studies, and they're the ones who are modeling the costs and assuming which costs for their analysis. And just off the top of my head, I think I can't think of a situation, there may be some, but I think in almost every case, the measure costs that are used in those studies are uniform across all climate zones. I don't think there's a lot of local adjustments. And then, yeah, the studies do get updated every couple, sometimes a couple months, sometimes a couple of years, to account for changes in cost data. There was just an update done, and we're working hard to for the new existing building study, and we're working hard to get that data in the tool within the next couple of weeks.
Great. I think this one's also for you, Eric. Do these data depend on the digitization of assessors' records?
So I assume, Ivana, you're talking about the building stock data, and the answer is no. We looked at using assessor data for this task and decided there were some better options.
Thanks.
One thing I wanted to add really quickly, just one of the questions that I typed an answer for, but it really goes a lot deeper, is the do you refer applicants to the SDG or other energy efficiency programs? And we definitely do. But the hard part, and the part that's hard to type in there is, when at the project development timeline do you get them that information? It's a lot easier for us to kind of get them up front if like some of our outreach staff are able to talk with them about it. We definitely have links to energy efficiency rebates, and happy to let them know about if there's financing or other programs they can take advantage of. Where it does get harder, and where I think we want to try to figure out some more mechanisms, is if they come in with a project already outlined, developed or designed, and they're just kind of coming in to get their permit stamp of approval, and that's where at that staff level, it's a lot harder to kind of talk with them about support or rebates or other project elements, and if you change this little element. So we do, but we're still trying to improve that.
Great. Thank you. Well, we have a couple minutes left. If there are any additional questions, do pop them in there. Some questions were just directly answered. So if you answered one and we didn't address it directly, you can just go to the answered tab and you should be able to see your response. With that, if not, I'm going to turn it back to Serena. Serena, is there anything else you'd like to add or say before we close out?
Thanks, everyone. I did see one more question come through the chat box. Maybe we have a minute to answer that one.
In the chat box, I don't. Let's see.
I can read it. I
Okay,
can
sure.
read it if you want. Does the City of Chula Vista deploy the retro commissioning, or do the owners contract with individual companies?
Yeah, they're gonna have to contract with a company.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate your engagement. We had a really good a number of participants actually here. I think we went up to 60 at one point. And thanks very much to our speakers, Barbara, Cory, and Eric. And you know where to find us. So if you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So thanks all. And have a good rest of your afternoon and a great long weekend.